Full-time work usually is at an agency, an ad agency, or a studio of some kind. Those jobs can range from being an assistant, being a secretary, being a coordinator. Hi, I'm Katya Alexander, and this is Pocket Change Films, the podcast where I teach you how to make your first project with your pocket change, then build your portfolio, then start getting budgets for your projects, and then hopefully making your first micro-budget feature.
Pocket change, pocket fame, film in the spot. We'll light up the screen when we hit play in the dark. Innovation, creation on a shoestring beat. Join the journey, feel the heat and everything.
For those of you who don't know me, I've been working in the industry for 12 years. I sold my first feature to Obama-Rama, and then I had a feature win South by Southwest and was sold to IFC and was later a trending film on Hulu. I also worked on the Las Vegas Sphere, which was an intersection between technology and entertainment. In the last episode, I taught you how to make sure your set runs smoothly, and I gave you some examples of the films and projects I made with only my pocket change. In this episode, we're going to kind of deviate away from making your projects because some people have been commenting they want to know how to actually get their first jobs in the film industry. So I'm going to talk about that. Working in the film industry while you're also making your own projects in the film industry is definitely a very good way to go because as you're working, you're networking, you're meeting all these different people. So as your projects kind of move up in your career, you start to know all of the people that can help you make all those next steps. I'm going to break this down into 3 types of jobs. One of them is going to be a full-time job, which is more traditional work, office work, the stuff that people think of when they think of job or career. The next one I'm going to talk about is temporary work, which is sort of a longer project, but it's still only temporary. You might be on it for a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on the project. And the third, which is kind of the most common in the film industry, which is just a full freelancer. You might be working a couple weeks, you might be working a single day, you might be working half of a day. Most of my work, even as a producer, tends to be on the freelancer side. Of course, as a producer, I'm on the project for a larger number of days than other people are on the project, but it still kind of is run the same way where every couple months I'm kind of applying for a new job. That is something to keep in mind when you want to join the film industry and work in the film industry. If you don't have a full-time job, you are going to be looking for work consistently, especially when a job is only a couple of days. You're essentially applying for a new job every couple of days. Let's talk about full-time work first. Full-time work usually is at an agency, an ad agency, or a studio of some kind. Those jobs can range from being an assistant, being a secretary, being a coordinator, being a script runner. There are a lot of different options within those jobs. So let's talk about the types of companies you would be applying for. The first one would be an agency, which is agents, managers, those types of people. It's called working the desk. Basically, you would be an assistant to some of the agents and managers that work at an agency. It's a super cool job because you're meeting a bunch of agents and managers. So later when you want to be a writer, you want to be a director, you have all the connections in that agency world and you can probably find an agent much easier than the average person. You can also be an assistant to a showrunner, which is the person who runs a television show, essentially. They're like the main person on a TV show. That's a really good job if you want to be a showrunner or you want to be a writer on a TV show. I've had friends do that to start their writing careers, and it was extremely beneficial. They also got to work on extremely award-winning content because they were working for amazing showrunners. And their name is now attached to that content, which is amazing. You can also be an assistant to VPs or senior VPs or sort of upper level people at different studios or companies. Studios being as high as like Nickelodeon or Fox, but also you can do it for smaller ad agencies or just smaller studios altogether. You can find a studio within the niche that you want to work with. Like if you want to work in animation, you should go become an assistant to someone who works in an animation studio. You want to be a showrunner, you should be an assistant to a showrunner, etc., etc., etc. Sort of the upper end of being an assistant would be being an assistant to a CEO. It is the job that gives you the most access to the most amount of people. My friends that are assistants to the CEOs of companies, especially major companies, they can pretty much get in contact with absolutely anybody they want to talk to. But even within the agent world, you're going to have to work your way up to that position. You can also be a full-time agent to a major director. I've had friends who were full-time agents to major directors. They got to be on their sets every day. Sometimes some of my friends even got to be a second unit director on some of their major multi-million-dollar budget sets, which is incredible. You definitely have to build trust with the person you are an agent to be handed that type of responsibility. But if you want to be a major director, becoming an assistant to one of them would be a really good step in that direction. Being an assistant can be a really tough job. You're pretty much on the clock 24/7. You can go into other work, like you could be a secretary at a studio in their office. You can be a coordinator at a studio in their office. You could be a production assistant. And again, you should work at a studio that kind of aligns with your interests. Something you can do is find your favorite TV shows that are on the air right now. And of course, they're under some sort of network like Fox or ABC, but those aren't really the studios making it. Go into the credits, figure out what studios are actually making those shows, and then apply for those studios. Again, these are much more traditional jobs. You're going to find these jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or those other sort of job finding programs. You can also go on the company's website and see if they're hiring for anything. There's a couple of companies, especially early on, that like about once a month I would check their website and just see if there were any jobs that interest me because I really wanted to work for those companies specifically. The application process is also very traditional. You will be submitting an application, waiting, hopefully getting an interview, doing a couple rounds of interviews, and then hopefully getting the job in the end. It's exactly like the full-time work you would expect. So let's talk about temporary jobs. Temporary jobs are sort of the in-between of a full-time job and freelance. Temporary jobs can be working on a TV show because television shows have a really long filming time, so you'll have a job for a couple of months. Or working on a movie. Some movies run for a couple of months. Or just finding temp work at different offices. So it would be an office you could do full-time work in, but they only need a temp person for that season or for the specific project that they're working on. Some of these jobs you can find on Indeed or LinkedIn, but a lot of these jobs you kind of have to know what's happening. So I had a friend that reached out to the heads of the TV show that he really loves. And he basically was like, can I be your intern for a couple of months, for 3 months? And they were like, well, we're not filming, we're not doing anything right now. And he's like, could I still please be your intern? And they surprisingly said yes. So he ended up interning for them and they loved him. I mean, he just kind of hung out while they were vaguely planning the next season of their show. Then when that next season was filming, they immediately hired him on the set and he still works on that show to this day. It's been years. So getting that job can be really hard because you have to kind of be in the know of like what's going on and you have to sort of know who to reach out to, and you're going to get a lot of no's. But once you have that job, especially if it's a TV show, every single time it's renewed for a new season, you can work on that show again. So it is a good way to have very consistent work and very long work. So you're not applying for a new job like 3 times a week. One of the things you can do for those jobs is go onto IMDb. If you get IMDb Pro, you can see sort of the projects that are in production right now, and you can see some of the people that are working on that project, and you can reach out to those people and be like, hey, I saw that the next season of the show is filming soon. Could I please work on this show? Send your resume, be extremely professional. Like I said, you're probably going to get a lot of no's, but it really only takes one yes. You can also network with a bunch of people and see if you can find someone who knows someone who's working on the show you want to work on, or just works on any show, and then see if you can get a job through that. I will admit, almost 100% of the jobs I've received, almost, not all, but almost 100% are through people that I know. So it was someone who recommended me for the job, or they were looking for someone specific and somebody thought of me. So networking is going to be extremely valuable. Where most people start in the film industry is freelancing. You're probably going to start freelancing on music video productions or short films. Sometimes commercials, but sometimes you have to work your way up to a commercial. Music videos are really tough. There are extremely long hours, and you're only really working like 1 to 2 days at a time. But it is where most people get their start. So you can reach out to music video companies or production companies and see if they're looking for production assistants. But the other way to find those jobs, and it's where I found those jobs, and it's actually where I look for people when I'm hiring, are Facebook groups and Mandy. I'm going to link those in the description below. Whatever area you're looking for, look for like film freelancing Los Angeles, film freelancing San Francisco, and see all the groups that pop up. Crewing, cast and crew San Francisco, cast and crew Los Angeles, cast and crew Atlanta. And people will constantly be posting, looking for a production assistant, $250 a day, these dates. And then there's usually an email, you just send your resume to that email. And then once you get on your first couple sets, you meet a bunch of people on those sets, and you meet like the coordinator and the person who like picks the production assistants. And that person is going to remember you and keep hiring you on sets in the future, especially if you do a really good job. And then as you're being a production assistant, you can start figuring out what sort of niche you want to work in. So if you want to be a producer, you would work up from being a production assistant to a second AD to an AD. And then some people are career ADs. It's an amazing career to have, especially being a union AD. But then some people go up to being a project manager and then a line producer. Becoming a producer really requires you to like make your own work and like win awards and stuff like that. But working your way up is an amazing way to network. If you want to work in the camera department, you can become a production assistant and then move over to being a production assistant in the camera department. And then you start learning more about cameras, you get more experience with them. And then hopefully that DP will eventually hire you as a second AC and then a first AC, etc., etc. Same thing with all the different departments. All the different departments except for G&E have their own PAs. So if you want to work in that department, eventually become a PA in that department, and then you'll work your way up, potentially with those people or just on different sets. If you want to have a creative job though, the most important thing is that while you're being a PA, while you're learning from people, while you're networking, you are also off doing that thing you want to do. Let's say you want to become a production designer. I would suggest production designing your house, taking a bunch of pictures of it, and finding short films you can be a production designer on, and doing different stuff like that so that you can build your portfolio. Because even if you're a PA, the only way to make it into like that creative side is to already be doing that creative side. Now, if you have a job outside of the film industry, that's totally fine. Just think of the skills that you're building there that can translate to the film industry. So let's say you're a secretary at a vet's office. You can easily be a secretary in a television office. So you work in Home Depot, you make an amazing PA, and then you can work in the carpentry department later. Just think about the different skills you're building, how it translates to that job, and then express that very well on your resume. So I'm going to talk a little bit about your resume because that's the first thing when I'm hiring that I see of you. So it's really important that you have a good resume. A mistake that I see very often is that people put the education at the top of their resume. It should be at the bottom. When your education's at the top of your resume, it's telling me that you just finished college and that's the biggest thing you've ever done. Also, like, don't include your GPA or anything like that. And don't include your graduation year. Just say, I went to this college, this is what I majored in, boom, done. I don't need to know anything else. The other thing I see wrong is resumes that are over one page. It should always be one page. I mean, even if you've won like 15 Oscars, you should still have a resume that is a single page. Just find a way to summarize all the stuff and don't include the unimportant things. Include your most recent stuff. The other thing I see is that people waste space on the page by explaining the duties of their job. Like they'll say, I was a production assistant, I set up crafties, and I did lockdowns, and I brought stuff to set, I did runs, blah, blah, blah. I know what a PA does, so you don't have to explain to me what you did. Unless you did duties that are slightly outside of being a PA. Like if you were an art PA and you did something very specific, like I was an art PA and I did all the food prep, that's important. Or if you were a PA for a specific actor or something because they really liked you, that you should include as well. But if you were just a standard production assistant, just say you were a production assistant. I know what you did. What you do include though is the name of the project, the studio behind the project, the name of the director, the name of the producers, and if there were any famous actors in the movie, the names of those actors. It gives the project some legitimacy. And then if it is a really small project, I'm not going to recognize anything. If it won any awards or got into any major film festivals, you should include that too. Anything that makes me realize, okay, this wasn't just friends in a basement. Like there was a little bit of legitimacy to this project that you were working on. When you are including things about your role, you should talk about the impact you had more so than what you just did. Like instead of saying, I ran their TikTok page, you can say, I improved their TikTok visibility by 300%. Or instead of saying, I worked in the post-production department or I assisted with post-production, you can say, I helped design a post-production workflow that ended up cutting down our time by 1 month. Something that says, okay, if I hire this person, this is what they're going to add to my team. And sometimes there isn't really that information about the project. I've seen people do like lists of stuff that's just a single line. Production assistant, NBC, television show, director, producer, blah, blah, blah. Just list. That's also fine. And then when there was something a little special, they elaborated on that one thing. It allows you to put more stuff on a single page, but also it doesn't give me unnecessary information. I also list any awards that I've won, any of the major film festivals that I've been in, different stuff like that. So then I'm adding more legitimacy to what I'm doing. Because sometimes if I'm just listing projects, it's like, oh, okay, like that's great. Like you made these films. But if you're saying, oh, I made these films and I won Best Director, I won Best Cinematographer, I won Best Short Film, I won these film festivals, I got into South by Southwest, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, okay, wow, this person really knows what they're doing. Of course, your resume probably won't start that way. I'm just saying that as you're building experience, make sure you're updating your resume with those experiences. I also add a special skills section to my resume because I've had background in stuff that isn't traditionally what a producer would do. So for example, I was a professional colorist. That's not something a lot of producers know how to do, so I add that to my special skills. I'm a colorist, I am a professional post-production supervisor, I'm a certified underwater cinematographer, I've worked in G&E, I've worked on sound stages. There's all these different jobs that I've done that have made me into the producer I am today. It allows me to talk to my crew. It allows me to run post-production. And when I produce, I tend to be hired as the post supervisor on the project. It's one of the reasons people hire me. So including those in my special skills makes me stand out. I also add some personal skills to make me stand out just as a person. Like I'm a competitive West Coast swing dancer. I speak French. I paint. I can play numerous musical instruments. And it makes people realize like who I am as a person, and it paints a bigger picture of me. Lastly, when it comes to your resume specifically, don't just type a bunch of stuff in a blank Word document and call it a day. Make your resume visually beautiful. You can find templates if you're not a very good designer, but don't just type everything up. Every single time I open a resume that's just like a Word document, I just kind of skim it. For example, on the edge of my resume, I have all the major film festival laurels that I've gotten into or won. So immediately when someone opens my resume, they're like, oh, wow, they won South by Southwest. Oh, they went to Tribeca. Oh, they've spoken at Venice Film Festival. Oh, they won the Maui Film Festival, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Immediately before even reading it, they know that I'm an accomplished producer. The other thing to think about is when you're applying for a job, apply for one job. Sometimes I'll do a big crew call for a bunch of positions. I'll say, I'm looking for a production designer. I'm looking for an associate producer. I'm looking for a coordinator. I'm looking for a PA. I'm looking for a grip. I'm looking for an electric, blah, 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 blah. I list the rates. I send it out into the world. And then I'll get these applications saying, I'm applying to be the associate producer, the PA, the grip, and a production designer. And then when I see that, sometimes I don't even open the email because it tells me that this person probably has no experience, especially if they're applying for the production assistant position and the associate producer position. Those are very drastically different levels, And so if they're applying for both and they're willing to be a PA, then it kind of tells me something about their experience. So just pick one job, maybe two, like saying I'm applying for the second AD role or a PA. Those would be two appropriate roles to apply for at once, or a coordinator or a PA. Because that tells me, okay, this person might be on the cusp of moving over to coordinator, but they're willing to still be a PA. But don't apply for like production designer or PA. It just doesn't make any sense, and it makes me not even go through the application. So I wanted to tell a little bit about my story and the ups and downs that I've had in my career to kind of paint a picture of like what it has looked like so far. Everybody's story is drastically different, so your story doesn't have to sound like mine. My story doesn't have to sound like yours, but I just want to give an idea of the highs and lows that I've experienced in my career so far.